Let's continue in our journey through the book of Ephesians by turning to Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. So in today's session, we're only going to cover the introduction to the armor of God. So let's read. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. So over the next few sessions, we're going to look at the different pieces of the armor and what they are, how to put them on. But this is the overarching, the whole reason why we put it on is because we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. We do not wrestle against one another. We wrestle against spiritual forces. Now, in the Old Testament, there are just a couple of times where the Bible just kind of peels back the curtain and shows us little glimpses of what's going on in the spiritual realm. Now, I'm only just going to mention a couple of different passages and just a couple of different references, because if we were to do a deep dive into each of these, which would be so fascinating, and hey, maybe we'll do a series on that, it would take a long time. So we're just going to, introduction, mention them. The first one, now I've written them up so that I don't have to edit it later. It's Daniel chapter 10, verse 12. Now, obviously, with all these verses, you need to read sort of the context to see what's actually going on. But in Daniel chapter 10, verse 12, this is where we see that the angel has come to Daniel and said, Daniel, from the moment that you started praying, God sent me. But I've been withheld 21 days in a spiritual battle with the spirit of the prince of Persia. And it wasn't until Michael, the archangel, came along and started battling as well. He's still up there battling, but I've been able to come and give you the message that God sent me to give you. How amazing is that? From the moment Daniel started praying. How many times do we start praying for things and we don't see the answer? So we're like, oh, has God heard me? The answer here is from the moment we start praying, God hears us. So more to the point, we've got to check ourselves and going, are we actually praying with the right motive if we're not hearing from God? Or is what's happening here where the angel that was sent to give Daniel an answer was actually withheld because of a spiritual battle? So you know what? When you are praying for something, when you are praying for someone's salvation, keep praying. Even if it is 20, 30, 40 years, keep praying, because you do not know what spiritual battle is going on behind the scenes. Now, the next one that we're going to quickly mention, it's 2 Kings chapter 6, and the key parts are verses 15 to 19. Now, this story, I love this story so much. This is the story where Elisha and his assistant, they're overlooking this whole valley, and you had the enemy army filled within the valley, and Elisha's assistant, sorry, I was about to say Elijah, but it was Elisha. Elisha's assistant was standing there and was just afraid and fearful and going, there's more against us than for us. What are we going to do? So Elisha prayed for his eyes to be open, and he saw that the whole mountains were filled with horses and chariots of fire. How amazing. So the horses and the chariots of fire surrounded around them on the mountains. That was the spiritual army. That was God's army that was there to help fight the battle. But the actual enemy army, that was a physical. They were humans. They were, what they could see. And then after God had opened the assistant's eyes to see that there were more for them than against them, Elisha prayed and asked God to blind the enemy army's eyes. And then Elisha led them away. Amazing, amazing story. Just giving you a little bit of a snippet. Now, the next one is yet again in 2 Kings as well. So this is 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 35. So in this one, we see that in one night, one angel managed to kill 185,000 of the enemy army. So one angel in one night killed 185,000 men. Is that not pretty crazy? And this is where people are like, oh, I'm strong enough to fight against angels. I'm like, no, you've missed the point there. He who is in me is stronger than he that is in the world. I am not in my own strength strong enough to fight against Satan, to fight against his demons. I cannot in my own strength do that. One of God's armies, one of God's angels, a single one, could kill 185,000. Satan's aim is to steal, kill, and destroy. He's been studying humankind. He's been studying humans for 6,000 years. If we look at the genealogy, it seems to be about 6,000 years that mankind has been walking around the earth. And he's been studying. And it comes up that it seems to come up that the problems that we have are common to man. The problems that we have are common. So in saying that, I in my own strength, I'm not strong enough to fight against this. That is why we put on the armor of God, because he that is in me is stronger than he that is in the world. So I know that I can stand. I know that when I put on each of these pieces of the armor, I am able to stand and fight against the evil of this world. What's the wording it uses here? I am able to stand and fight against the principalities, against the powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Now, I can only fight against these if I take up God's spiritual armor. So that is where we are going to over the next few sessions. Just really study in and go, what is God's spiritual armor? Now, this spiritual armor, as I think I mentioned just before, it was mimicked off an Emporium guard. So Paul was under house arrest. We believe that when he wrote this letter, that this is one of the letters that he wrote when he was in house arrest in Rome. And during that 2-year period, he was chained to an Emporium guard 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They had changing shifts, so it wasn't the one person the entire time. There would have been changing shifts. But each of them, so these are the elite, the top of the top Roman soldiers. So they would have been wearing the Roman uniform. And this is the analogy that Paul pulls on to tell us to put on this spiritual armor, because it was the Roman armory was quite a common picture. It was something that was quite well known at that point in time. Now, let's continue and let's look at a couple more times when the curtains are pulled back on the spiritual realm. The next one, Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 12. Now, I love this passage so much. It is so fascinating. In this passage, we see that a certain type of God's angel, so they seem to have different descriptions, but this particular type, they've got these big wings and they are always moving forward, but they can move in any direction. So always in a straight line, always forward, but any direction. I just find that detail and description fascinating. I can't even get my head around how that's possible. But also in this description, they do have, 4 different faces. So one face on each side. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to when we get to see these creatures, these angels face to face and go, that's how they always move forward. Now, the next one. This is the last reference I want to go to. Matthew chapter 26, verses 52 to 54. This is one powerful, powerful passage. So this is when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He had just prayed. He just poured out and said, God, if possible, let this cup pass from me. It wasn't possible. The way for us to be saved, Jesus had to go and endure the cross. Now they've come to arrest him. And one of the disciples that was with him pulled out a soldier to cut off the people that have come to arrest Jesus' ear. And Jesus is like, put it away. Now's not the time to fight. Because don't you know that if I wanted to, I could ask my Father and he would dispatch more than 12 legions of angels. Now, I was just doing a quick Google thing to go, well, how many is in a legion? And a very quick Google search says there's 6,000 to a legion. So this is a Roman time. But when I spent like 2 more seconds Googling this and researching, I found contradicting websites. So it seemed to be that at the Roman time, the number of people in a legion, it changed depending on when. Now, I couldn't find the answer quickly of how many soldiers were in a legion at the time of Jesus when he was being arrested. So it is somewhere probably between about 4,500 men to 6,000 men at that point in time in a legion in the Roman army. So however many angels would be in a legion, it's in the thousands. And Jesus is saying, well, if I just ask my Father, he would dispatch 12 legions. So we're now in the hundreds of thousands of angels that would be dispatched. But Jesus is like, I'm not asking for it. I'm going to let these people arrest me. I am going to proceed forward. I am going to go to the cross. I'm going to die on the cross and pay the price for our sins. So it's because Jesus did that, because Jesus chose to not walk away. Even though he prayed and said, if possible, let this cup pass from me. He saw it wasn't possible, so he chose to proceed forward, even though he knew that it was going to be horrific and painful and he was going to get tortured. He still chose to. He chose to allow the people he created, because he's God, he created all of us. He knitted all of us together in our mother's womb. And he chose to allow them to torture him, to kill him, to pay the price for our sins, which I think is amazing. And because Jesus did that, we are now able to stand firm against the principalities, against the powers of darkness. We can stand our ground and put on the full armor of God.